My father worked his whole life and has nothing to show for it. 40 years at the same company, every single day, whether it was rain, hail, or shine, sick, exhausted. It didn't really matter. He showed up. He saved every penny, never bought anything extravagant, never took risks. He did everything that he was supposed to do. And now at 65, he's barely surviving. No retirement, no freedom, no reward for 4 decades of sacrifice. I watched it break him. I watched the whole system betray a good man who followed every rule. And I made a decision. I refuse to let it break me. Now, this isn't about disrespecting my father. It's about learning from his sacrifice. It's about honoring what he built by building something different. Because if I follow that same path that he did, well, then his sacrifice was for nothing. It meant nothing. So let me tell you about my dad. He came from nothing. Immigrant family, flew over from Philippines, no advantages, no connections, just hard work and discipline. He got a job at a factory, when he first came here. Started, at the bottom, and I don't really think he made it any further than that, to be honest. I think he just stayed at the front line. Didn't really have any aspirations of going to management or supervision. So, it was pretty stable, pretty secure, pretty safe. It was a full-time gig. He did everything the right way. He showed up early, stayed late, never complained, never caused any problems. Because he believed in the system. He believed that if you worked hard, you were loyal, you saved your money, well, then you'd be taken care of. He can't afford to actually retire. And the company he gave, 40 years of his life to, they replaced him with someone younger who'll work for less. No gold watch, no thank you, just done. Thanks for breakfast. Now I watched this happen in real time. I watched a man who did everything right get betrayed by the system that he trusted. And for a while it worked. We had a roof over our heads, food on the table, nothing fancy, but we were okay. But then I guess the company started cutting benefits. Pensions disappeared, healthcare costs went up, the promotions stopped coming. And, my dad just kept his head down, kept working, kept believing that if he stayed loyal, everything would work out. Unfortunately, it didn't. Now he's 65. His body's broken from decades of manual labor. His retirement fund is a fraction of what he needs. He can't afford to retire early. We can't actually afford to retire. I watched a man who did everything right and get betrayed by the system that he trusted. And it changed me. Here's what my father's generation was told. Get a good job, work hard, be loyal, retire with a pension. That was the deal. That was the promise. But the system changed the rules and nobody told them. Pensions disappeared, jobs got outsourced, loyalty became a liability because you cost too much. The safe path wasn't safe at all. It was a trap. And millions of good men like my father are paying the price. But here's the thing. My generation knows the deal is broken. We've watched our fathers sacrifice everything for companies that don't even care about them. So why are we still being told to follow the same path, right? Get a degree, get a good job, work your way up, play it safe. Safe? There's nothing safe about trading 40 years of your life for a promise that won't be kept. There's nothing safe about building your entire life on a foundation controlled by people who replace you the second it's profitable. The riskiest thing you can do is put your future in someone else's hands. And that's what I learned watching my father. So I made a choice. I'm doing the opposite. 9 to 5, climbing the corporate ladder, trading my time for money, time for a paycheck that barely covers rent. I'm building my own thing, building skills that can't be outsourced. I'm building income streams that don't depend on one company deciding what my worth is. And you know what? My family thinks I'm crazy. Friends think I'm crazy. My dad doesn't understand why I won't just get a stable job. My mum worries that I'm throwing away opportunities. Extended family thinks I'm being reckless. And I get it. I do. Because I guess from their perspective, they're trying to protect me. They're trying to save me from struggle. But what they don't see is that I'm trying to save myself from their struggle. I'm not rejecting my father's work ethic. I'm rejecting the system that exploited it. Now, I'm not saying, he was wrong. I'm saying the game changed and we have to adapt. You see, the internet changed everything. You can build a business from your laptop. You can create value and get paid directly for it. You don't need a boss to give you permission to earn. But that requires a different mindset, a different approach. It requires betting on yourself instead of betting on a company. And that scares the shit out of the older generation because it wasn't an option for them. And here's the hardest part. I feel guilty. Like, don't get me wrong. Every time my dad asks when I'm going to get a real job, I feel it. Every time my mum expresses concern, how's work going? I don't know what to tell her because I love them. I respect them and I know they sacrificed everything for me to have opportunities that they didn't have. But here's what I realized. Honoring their sacrifice doesn't mean repeating their mistakes. They sacrificed so I could have choices, so I could build something better. If I take the same path and end up exactly where they are, broke, exhausted, with nothing to show for it, then what was the point of their sacrifice? So I guess the way I honor my father isn't by following his path. It's by learning from it. It's by taking the work ethic that he taught me and applying it to something that actually builds wealth and freedom. That's the gift. That's the legacy. Because it requires me to disappoint them in the short term to honor them in the long term. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? And let me be real with you. The fear is real. It is heavy. You want your parents to be proud. You want them to understand. You want their approval. But sometimes the path that makes them proud in the short term is the path that destroys you in the long term. My dad would be happier if I had a 9 to 5 with benefits because in his mind, that's security, that's success. But I know better. I've seen how the story ends. So I had to make a choice. Do I live to make my parents comfortable or do I live to build the life that they couldn't? And I chose the latter because, 20 years from now, when I've built something real, when I have time freedom and financial freedom, when I can actually take care of my parents instead of just surviving like they did, they'll understand. They might not get it now, but they'll sell it eventually. And even if they don't, I'll know that I made the right choice because the alternative is living with their approval, but dying with their regrets. And I just can't do that. So how do you actually navigate this? How do you actually honor your father while refusing to repeat his path? Well, firstly, separate the lesson from the method. You see, my father taught me discipline, taught me work ethic, taught me integrity, taught me showing up even when you don't feel like it. Those lessons are timeless. Those principles apply to any path. But the method, trading time for money in a corporate system, that's outdated. I took his lessons and applied them to entrepreneurship, to building skills, to creating value in new ways, to creating things. The same principles, different application. That's how you honor the lesson without repeating the same mistake. Second, have the hard conversations. Sit down with your father, look him in the eye, tell him that you see his sacrifice, tell him you respect it, and then tell him why you're choosing differently. Not to hurt him, not to reject him, but to build on what he started. He might not understand immediately. He might push back, but at least he'll know you're not being reckless. You're being intentional. And over time, as you prove it's working, that conversation will make more sense to him. And third, prove it with results, not words. You see, your parents don't need to understand your path. They need to see that it works. Stop trying to convince them with explanations and just show them with results. Build the business, make the money, create the freedom. When they see you thriving, when they see that you're not struggling like they feared, the doubt will fade because results, and you already know this, always speak louder than any conversation ever could. And fourth, take care of them when you make it. This is the ultimate honor. You see, my father took care of me his whole life. He sacrificed his dreams so I could chase mine. The way I honor that isn't by making him proud through traditional success. It's by building something big enough to take care of him the way he took care of me. So he never has to work another day, so he can finally rest. So the second half of his life is easier than the first. That's the goal. That's the legacy. Not repeating his path, but making his sacrifice worth it. And here's what I want you to understand, if I guess you're watching this and you can relate. You're not betraying your father by choosing a different path. You're continuing what he started. He broke his back so you wouldn't have to. He sacrificed so you would have the options that you didn't. Same thing with my mum. She was a hard worker as well. She got injured because of work. The worst thing you can do is waste that gift by playing it safe and ending up exactly where he is. A generation has tools and opportunities that they didn't have. We have the internet, we have global markets, we have the ability to build businesses with almost no startup capital. We'd be fools not to use this advantage. But we also have their work ethic, their integrity, their discipline. That's the combination that wins. Old school principles applied to new school opportunities. That's how you honor your father. That's how you build generational wealth instead of generational struggle. That's how you make sure that your sons don't have this same conversation about you. So here's what I'm doing differently. I'm building skills that scale. Writing, content creation, marketing, sales, skills that can generate income from anywhere in the world. I'm building multiple income streams so that I'm never dependent on one source. So no company can pull the rug from under me. I'm building assets that appreciate instead of trading time for money that depreciates. And more importantly, I'm building something that I actually care about, something that aligns with my values and something that serves people. Not just grinding for a paycheck, not just surviving until retirement. I'm actually building, I'm actually creating, actually living. That's the difference. My father spent 40 years building someone else's dream. I'm spending my time building mine. And when I succeed, it won't just change my life. It'll change his life too and my family's life. That's the goal. That's what drives me every single day. That's what gets me up out of bed every single morning. So if you're watching this and you're torn between following the traditional path and building your own, just take it from me. I'm currently going through it right now. Your father's sacrifice wasn't so you could repeat a struggle. It was so you could do better. Honor him by learning from his path, not by walking it. Take his work ethic, take his integrity, and take his discipline, but apply that to something that actually builds wealth and freedom. Something that gives you options, something that lets you live and not just survive. You're not disrespecting him, you're honoring him by making his sacrifice mean something. And one day, when you build something real, when you can take care of him the way he took care of you, he'll understand. So if you guys found this valuable, drop a comment if this hit home. And if you're navigating through this same tension, if you're trying to honor your father while choosing your own way, and if you're ready to start building something different, I created the 7-day reset that shows you exactly where to start. Links in the description. For our fathers, for ourselves, for the generation that we'll raise, let's build something meaningful. Let's build something different. I'll catch you guys in the next one.